Sarah Martinez had always been different from the other recruits at Fort Braxton. While most of the young soldiers came from military families or had dreamed of Army life since childhood, Sarah arrived with secrets hidden beneath her uniform. She was 22 years old, with dark hair always pulled back in regulation style and eyes that seemed to hold stories she never shared. The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds as Sergeant Davis barked orders at the new recruits. Sarah stood in line with 15 other soldiers, all trying their best to look tough and ready. But something about Sarah made the others uncomfortable. Maybe it was the way she kept to herself during meals, or how she never joined in when they shared stories about home during their free time. "Martinez," Sergeant Davis called out, his voice echoing across the field. "You're up for combat drills. Let's see what you're made of." Sarah stepped forward, her boots crunching on the gravel. The other recruits watched with curious eyes. Some whispered among themselves, wondering why she always wore long sleeves even in the heat, and why she never showered with the rest of them. These small differences had already made her a target for gossip and suspicion. Private Johnson, a tall blonde recruit from Texas, had been the loudest with his comments. "There's something weird about her," he had told the others just that morning. "She acts like she's hiding something big." As Sarah approached the training dummy, she could feel 20 pairs of eyes on her back. The drill was simple but demanding, a series of combat moves that tested strength, speed, and technique. She had practiced these moves countless times in her previous life, though none of her fellow recruits knew about that part of her story. The sergeant demonstrated the sequence once more. Strike, block, counterattack, and disarm. Do it clean, do it fast, and do it right. Your life might depend on it someday. Sarah nodded and took her position. She could hear some of the recruits behind her placing quiet bets on whether she would succeed or fail. Most bet against her. They saw her as the quiet outsider who didn't belong with real soldiers. When the whistle blew, Sarah moved. Her first strike was precise and powerful, hitting the dummy exactly where it would disable an opponent. Her block was smooth and confident, but it was her counterattack that made everyone pay attention. She moved with a fluidity and skill that seemed impossible for someone who had supposedly never seen combat before. Private Chen, who had been mocking her just minutes earlier, stopped mid-laugh. "How did she do that?" he whispered to Johnson, but Sarah wasn't finished. The disarming move she performed was not standard military training. It was something more advanced, more dangerous, and definitely not something taught to new recruits. She completed the entire sequence in less than 30 seconds, faster than any recruit in recent memory. Sergeant Davis raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He had seen many recruits come and go, but Sarah's movements reminded him of something else entirely. Something that made him wonder who she really was and where she had learned to fight like that. As Sarah returned to her place in line, the mockery from her fellow recruits had transformed into confused silence. They had expected her to struggle, maybe even fail completely. Instead, she had performed better than anyone, including some who claimed to have fighting experience. "Not bad, Martinez," Sergeant Davis said, his voice giving nothing away. "But remember, fancy moves don't make a soldier. Discipline and teamwork do." Sarah nodded respectfully, but she could see the questions forming in everyone's minds. She had been careful to hide her abilities, but today something had gone wrong. The muscle memory had taken over, and she had performed moves that revealed far more about her past than she ever intended. During lunch break, the whispers grew louder. Where had she learned to fight like that? Why was she really here? And what was she trying so hard to hide? Sarah ate her meal in silence, knowing that her carefully constructed cover story was beginning to crack. She touched her left shoulder unconsciously, feeling the edges of something hidden beneath her uniform, the ink that told her real story, the one she could never let anyone see. Not here, not now, and definitely not these people who already suspected she wasn't who she claimed to be. Little did she know that her display of skill had caught the attention of more than just her fellow recruits. In his office overlooking the training grounds, Commander Williams had been watching through his window. He had seen the entire drill, and something about Sarah's movements had triggered a memory that made him reach for a classified file he kept locked in his desk drawer. As the afternoon training session approached, Sarah tried to convince herself that everything would be fine. She would be more careful, blend in better, and keep her secrets safe. But deep down she knew that her past was catching up with her, and soon there would be nowhere left to hide. The afternoon training session brought new challenges and more opportunities for Sarah's fellow recruits to voice their suspicions. As they prepared for weapons training, Private Johnson couldn't keep his mouth shut any longer. "Hey, Martinez," he called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Where'd you learn those moves this morning? That wasn't basic training stuff." Sarah kept cleaning her rifle, not looking up. "I watched a lot of action movies growing up," she replied flatly. It was a weak excuse and everyone knew it. Private Chen laughed mockingly. "Action movies? Come on, nobody learns to fight like that from watching TV. You moved like you've done real combat before." Other recruits began to gather around, sensing drama. Sarah could feel the circle closing in around her. She had hoped to keep a low profile, but her morning performance had ruined any chance of that. "Maybe she's one of those martial arts freaks," suggested Private Rodriguez. "You know, the ones who think they're ninjas or something." The mockery was getting worse. Sarah continued to focus on her weapon, but inside she was calculating. How much did they really suspect? How long before someone figured out the truth? She had worked too hard to get here to let a few suspicious recruits ruin everything. Sergeant Davis entered the weapons range and immediately sensed the tension. "What's all this chatter about? This is a training facility, not a gossip club." "We were just asking Martinez about her fighting background, Sergeant," Johnson said with fake innocence. "She showed some pretty advanced moves this morning. We're curious about where she learned them." The sergeant's eyes moved to Sarah, who was still methodically cleaning her rifle. "Is that so? Well, curiosity is good, but focusing on your own training is better. Everyone grab your gear. We're doing marksmanship drills." As they moved to the firing line, the whispers continued. Sarah could hear fragments of conversations around her. Some recruits thought she might be ex-military trying to hide a dishonorable discharge. Others wondered if she was some kind of spy or undercover agent. The theories were getting more wild and more dangerous. During the shooting exercise, Sarah faced another dilemma. She was an excellent marksman, far better than any new recruit should be. But after the morning's mistake, she knew she had to be careful. She deliberately missed a few shots, trying to appear average. "Struggling a bit there, Martinez," Johnson called out after she intentionally shot wide of the target. "Guess those movie skills don't work with real guns." Sarah gritted her teeth but said nothing. Let them think she was a poor shot. It was better than the alternative, but Sergeant Davis was watching carefully. He noticed that her misses were very controlled, as if she was deliberately avoiding the center of the target. A truly poor marksman would have random patterns. Sarah's shots were too precise in their imprecision. After the drill, as the recruits were cleaning their weapons, Private Chen decided to push harder. "You know what I think, Martinez? I think you're hiding something big. Normal people don't just show up here with mystery fighting skills and then pretend they can't shoot straight. Leave her alone." "Chen," said Private Williams, one of the few recruits who hadn't joined in the harassment, "we all have our reasons for being here." "No," Chen continued, encouraged by the audience. "I think she's running from something. Maybe she got kicked out of another unit. Maybe she did something bad and thinks she can start over here." Sarah's hand tightened on her rifle. These accusations were hitting closer to home than she liked. She had indeed been running from something, but not what they thought. Or maybe, Johnson added with a cruel smile, she's not even really a woman. That would explain why she never showers with us. Why she always wears long sleeves. Maybe Martinez has something to hide under that uniform. The comment crossed a line, and Sarah's carefully controlled composure cracked slightly. She turned to face Johnson, her eyes flashing with an anger that made several recruits step back. For a moment, they saw something dangerous in her expression, something that reminded them she could fight in ways they couldn't understand. "That's enough," Sergeant Davis barked, having overheard the exchange. "Johnson Chen, you're on extra duty tonight. Kitchen patrol. And if I hear any more harassment of fellow recruits, you'll be scrubbing latrines for a week." As the group dispersed, Sarah felt both relief and growing dread. The sergeant had stopped the immediate harassment, but the damage was done. The recruits were now actively suspicious and looking for ways to prove their theories. She couldn't keep making mistakes like this morning's combat display. That evening, as Sarah lay on her bunk, she could hear whispered conversations in the dark. The other recruits were still talking about her, still trying to figure out her secrets. She touched the hidden ink on her shoulder again, feeling the raised edges of the tattoo that told her real story. The tattoo was more than just body art. It was a symbol of her former life, one that would instantly identify her to anyone who knew what to look for. It contained information that could destroy her new identity and put her in terrible danger. That's why she always wore long sleeves, why she avoided the showers, why she had to be so careful about everything. But maintaining her cover was becoming harder every day. The skilled fighter's instincts kept breaking through despite her best efforts to suppress them. And now her fellow recruits were actively looking for proof that she wasn't who she claimed to be. What Sarah didn't know was that her performance had attracted attention from much higher up the chain of command. Commander Williams had spent the afternoon making phone calls and checking databases. Something about Sarah Martinez seemed familiar, and he was determined to figure out why. 3 days had passed since the weapons training incident, and the situation had only gotten worse for Sarah. The mockery from her fellow recruits had evolved into active investigation. They were watching her every move, looking for clues about her mysterious past. Private Johnson had appointed himself as the leader of this unofficial investigation. During morning chow, he made sure to sit where he could observe Sarah's every action. He noticed that she ate quickly and always left the mess hall before others finished. He saw how she chose a corner bunk that gave her a view of all entrances to the barracks. These were not the habits of a normal recruit. "She's definitely military trained," Johnson whispered to Chen as they watched Sarah efficiently pack her gear. "Look how she folds everything. That's not something you learn in basic training. That's muscle memory from years of service." Chen nodded eagerly. "And did you see how she reacted when that truck backfired yesterday? She didn't jump or look confused like the rest of us. She immediately scanned for threats like she was expecting enemy fire. Their amateur investigation was becoming more sophisticated. Rodriguez had started keeping a notebook, writing down every suspicious behavior he observed. Williams tried to engage Sarah in conversations about her hometown, looking for inconsistencies in her story. Even some of the recruits who had initially defended her were starting to have doubts. The breaking point came during a surprise nighttime drill. At 2 a.m. the alarm sounded, and all recruits were ordered to assemble in full gear within 5 minutes. It was designed to test their readiness and ability to respond under pressure. Most recruits stumbled around in the dark, confused and disoriented. They bumped into each other, dropped equipment, and struggled to get dressed quickly. But Sarah was different. She was awake, dressed, and ready before most others had even gotten out of their bunks. "How is that possible?" Chen muttered, watching Sarah stand at perfect attention while he was still trying to tie his boots. Johnson was watching too, and what he saw confirmed his worst suspicions. Sarah hadn't just woken up quickly. She had been lying in her bunk fully clothed as if she was expecting the drill. That level of preparedness suggested either insider knowledge or paranoid training that went far beyond anything a normal recruit would have. After the drill, as everyone tried to get back to sleep, Johnson made his decision. "Tomorrow," he whispered to his allies, "we find out what she's really hiding." The next morning brought advanced combat training, and Sarah knew she was facing her biggest test yet. The course involved obstacles, close-quarters combat, and scenarios designed to push recruits to their limits. She would have to choose between maintaining her cover and performing well enough to avoid drawing negative attention from the instructors. Sergeant Davis explained the exercise. "This is a simulation of real combat conditions. You'll face multiple opponents, navigate difficult terrain, and make split-second decisions. This isn't about showing off. It's about proving you can handle pressure when lives are on the line." As the recruits prepared for their turns, Johnson positioned himself where he could record Sarah's performance on his phone. He had convinced the others that they needed evidence if they were going to report their suspicions to the chain of command. When Sarah's turn came, she faced an impossible choice. The course was designed to be extremely difficult, and holding back too much would result in failure and possible dismissal from the program. But performing at her actual skill level would reveal abilities that no new recruit should possess. She decided to find a middle ground, perform well enough to pass but not so well as to raise more suspicions. It was a calculated risk that required precise control over every movement. Sarah entered the course and immediately encountered the first challenge: 3 training opponents armed with padded weapons. She could have disabled all 3 in seconds using techniques from her former life, but instead she engaged them in a more conventional manner, taking hits she could have avoided and using only basic defensive moves. But even her restrained performance was impressive. Her footwork was too smooth, her reactions too quick, and her tactical thinking too advanced. She was clearly holding back, but what she was holding back from was the question. Johnson watched through his phone camera, recording every move. "Look at that," he whispered to Chen. "She's not even breathing hard, and she just took down 3 guys. No way, that's beginner's luck." As Sarah moved through the obstacle course portion, her athletic ability became even more obvious. She scaled walls with the efficiency of someone who had done it countless times before. Her rope climbing technique was textbook perfect. When she encountered the simulated sniper scenario, she knew exactly how to move to avoid the enemy lines of sight. By the time she finished the course, a crowd had gathered to watch. Even recruits from other units had stopped to see the mysterious soldier who was dominating the exercise while clearly not trying her hardest. "Time!" Sergeant Davis called out. Sarah had completed the course in the 3rd best time of the day, which was impressive for someone supposedly new to military training. But those who were watching carefully could tell she had deliberately slowed down during certain segments. As Sarah walked back to the group, she could see the hostile faces of her fellow recruits. They weren't just suspicious anymore. They were angry. They felt like she had been lying to them, playing games while they struggled with training that seemed to come naturally to her. "That was quite a performance, Martinez," Johnson said loudly as she approached. "Almost like you've done this before." Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I've been training hard, just like everyone else." "Training hard?" Chen laughed bitterly. "We've all been training hard, but none of us move like we're already Special Forces soldiers. What's your real story, Martinez? Who are you really?" The confrontation was escalating, and other recruits were starting to take sides. Some supported Johnson's aggressive questioning, while others thought they were going too far. But everyone wanted answers. Sarah realized that her time was running out. The careful balance she had been trying to maintain was collapsing, and soon she would have to either reveal the truth or face consequences that could be far worse than exposure. What she didn't know was that Commander Williams had been watching the entire exercise from his office window, and he had just made a phone call that would change everything. The voice on the other end of the line had confirmed his suspicions, and now he faced a choice that would affect not just Sarah's future, but the safety of everyone on the base. The tension in the barracks that evening was thick enough to cut with a knife. Johnson had rallied almost all the recruits to his side, and they had decided that enough was enough. They were going to get answers from Sarah Martinez one way or another. "We know you're lying," Johnson announced as Sarah entered the barracks after evening chow. "The question is what you're lying about and why." Sarah looked around the room and saw that nearly everyone was staring at her with hostile expressions. Only Private Williams seemed uncomfortable with the confrontation, but even he wasn't speaking up in her defense anymore. "I don't know what you're talking about," Sarah replied calmly, moving toward her bunk, but Johnson stepped into her path, blocking her way. "Don't play dumb," Chen added, moving to Johnson's side. "We've been watching you for days. Everything about you screams military experience. Real military experience, not the basic training we're all going through." Rodriguez opened his notebook and began reading from his observations. "You wake up before the alarm every morning. You never seem surprised by drills or exercises. Your equipment is always perfect, like you've been doing this for years. And today's performance was just the final proof." Sarah remained silent, calculating her options. She could try to bluff her way through this confrontation, but these recruits had clearly put considerable effort into building their case against her. Simple denials weren't going to work anymore. "We think you're either a spy or someone running from a dishonorable discharge," Johnson continued. "Either way, you don't belong here with honest soldiers trying to serve their country." The accusation of being dishonest stung more than Sarah expected. These recruits had no idea what she had sacrificed for her country, or what she was still sacrificing by being here. But she couldn't tell them that without revealing everything else. "Maybe we should just check her for identifying marks," Chen suggested with a cruel smile. "I bet someone with her background has some interesting tattoos or scars that would tell us the real story." Sarah's blood ran cold. The suggestion was getting dangerously close to her biggest secret. If they discovered the tattoo on her shoulder, it would be over instantly. The ink contained information that would not only expose her identity, but put her life in immediate danger. "You can't do that," Private Williams finally spoke up. That's harassment, and it's against regulations. So is lying about your background and infiltrating a military unit, Johnson shot back. If she's got nothing to hide, then she won't mind proving it. Several recruits moved closer, and Sarah realized that the situation was about to turn physical. She could fight them off, easily in fact, but that would only prove their point about her advanced training. It would also likely result in serious disciplinary action or even criminal charges. Before the confrontation could escalate further, the barracks door swung open with a bang that made everyone freeze. Sergeant Davis stood in the doorway, his expression dark with anger. "What exactly is going on here?" he demanded, his voice carrying the authority that made even the boldest recruit step back. "We were just talking, Sergeant," Johnson said, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Talking?" Davis stepped into the room and looked around at the obvious confrontation setup. "This looks more like harassment to me. Everyone except Martinez outside for additional PT. Now." The recruits began to file out, but Johnson couldn't resist one last comment. "This isn't over, Martinez. We're going to find out the truth about you." After the others left, Sergeant Davis closed the door and turned to Sarah. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. Sarah wondered if the sergeant was also suspicious of her background, or if he was simply maintaining discipline. "You want to tell me what that was really about?" Davis asked finally. Sarah considered her options carefully. "They think I have more military experience than I've admitted to. They're not wrong, but it's complicated." Davis raised an eyebrow. "Complicated how?" "I can't explain without revealing things that could put people in danger," Sarah said honestly. "I know that sounds like I'm being evasive, but it's the truth." The sergeant studied her face for a long moment. "You know, I've been training recruits for 15 years. I've seen every type of person walk through those doors. Most of them are exactly what they appear to be. But sometimes, very rarely, someone shows up who's carrying secrets." Sarah said nothing, but her expression confirmed that Davis was on the right track. "The thing about secrets," he continued, "is that they have a way of coming out eventually. And when they do, it's usually messy. People get hurt, careers get destroyed, and sometimes worse things happen. I understand that, Sergeant. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're sitting on something big enough to get people killed. Those recruits out there might be acting like jerks, but they're not stupid. They can see that you're not who you claim to be." Sarah felt the weight of the conversation. Davis wasn't threatening her, but he was making it clear that her situation was becoming untenable. She had hoped to complete her training and disappear into the regular army, but that plan was falling apart. "There's something else you should know," Davis said, his voice dropping lower. "Commander Williams has been asking questions about you. He's made some phone calls to people with very high security clearances. Whatever you're hiding, it's big enough to attract attention from the top." Sarah's heart sank. If the commander was investigating her background, it was only a matter of time before he discovered the truth. And once that happened, her carefully constructed new life would be over. "My advice," Davis continued, "is to get ahead of this situation before it gets ahead of you. Talk to someone you trust, figure out your options, and decide what you're going to do. Because one way or another, the truth is coming out." As the sergeant left the barracks, Sarah sank onto her bunk and buried her face in her hands. Everything she had worked for over the past 6 months was crumbling around her. The hostile recruits, the suspicious sergeant, and now an investigation from the commander. It was all closing in at once. She touched the hidden tattoo on her shoulder one more time, feeling the detailed ink that told the story of her former life. Tomorrow she would have to make a decision that would determine not just her future, but potentially the safety of people she had sworn to protect. Outside the barracks, she could hear the other recruits being put through punishing physical exercises as punishment for the confrontation. Their anger toward her would only grow stronger after this. She was running out of time, running out of options, and running out of places to hide. The truth was indeed coming out, and Sarah Martinez knew that when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. The next morning brought an unexpected development that changed everything. As the recruits assembled for morning formation, Commander Williams appeared on the training ground, something that rarely happened during routine exercises. His presence immediately put everyone on edge, including Sarah. "Attention," Sergeant Davis barked, and every recruit snapped to perfect posture. Commander Williams was a tall, imposing man in his 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He had served in multiple combat zones and had a reputation for being both fair and utterly uncompromising when it came to military discipline. "I understand there have been some tensions among the recruits," he began, his voice carrying easily across the formation. "Accusations, suspicions, and harassment. This ends now." Johnson and Chen exchanged worried glances. They had thought their investigation was discreet, but apparently word had reached the highest levels of command. "In the military, we depend on trust and unit cohesion," Williams continued. "When that breaks down, people die. So we're going to address this situation directly and completely." The commander's eyes found Sarah in the formation, and she felt a chill run down her spine. There was something in his expression that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Martinez stepped forward. Sarah's heart pounded as she broke from formation and approached the commander. Every eye was on her, and she could feel the weight of their stares. This was the moment she had been dreading since the day she arrived at Fort Braxton. "Sir," she said, coming to attention in front of him. Commander Williams studied her face for a long moment. "There have been questions about your background, soldier. Questions that need answers." "Yes, sir." "Some of your fellow recruits believe you have military experience that you haven't disclosed. They think you're hiding something significant about your past." His voice was neutral, but his eyes were searching. "Are they correct?" Sarah felt the moment of truth arriving faster than she had expected. She could continue lying, but she could see in the commander's expression that he already suspected the answer. The question was how much he actually knew. "Yes, sir," she said quietly. "They are correct." A murmur ran through the formation behind her. Johnson felt vindicated. He had been right all along. But his satisfaction was about to turn to shock as the full truth began to emerge. "I see," William said. "And why haven't you been honest about this experience?" Sarah took a deep breath. "Because my previous service is classified, sir. I'm not at liberty to discuss details without proper authorization." The commander nodded as if this was exactly what he had expected to hear. "And what level of classification are we talking about, soldier?" "The highest level, sir." Williams reached into his uniform jacket and pulled out a folded document. "Then perhaps it's time we had a proper conversation about your real identity, Agent Sarah Chen." The use of her real name hit the formation like a bombshell. "Sarah Chen, not Sarah Martinez." The recruits began whispering among themselves, confusion and shock replacing their earlier anger and suspicion. Sarah's face went pale. If the commander knew her real name, then he knew everything. Her cover was completely blown, and there was no point in continuing the charade. "Yes, sir," she said, her voice barely audible. "For those of you who are confused," Williams addressed the formation, "the woman you know as Sarah Martinez is actually Special Agent Sarah Chen of the Defense Intelligence Agency. She has been operating under deep cover for the past 8 months. The revelation sent shockwaves through the group of recruits. Johnson's mouth fell open. Chen looked like he had been slapped. Rodriguez dropped his notebook. Even Sergeant Davis seemed surprised by the extent of the truth. "Agent Chen," Williams continued, "was part of a highly classified operation that was compromised 6 months ago. Several of her colleagues were killed, and she barely escaped with her life. She has been in witness protection while intelligence services tracked down the people responsible for the breach." Sarah felt exposed and vulnerable as her real story was laid bare. The commander was revealing details that she had hoped would never see the light of day. "The reason Agent Chen has been training as a regular recruit," Williams explained, "is that we needed to keep her hidden while maintaining her combat readiness. Her advanced skills, which some of you noticed, come from years of specialized training in intelligence and special operations." Private Williams, who had sometimes defended Sarah during the harassment, raised his hand tentatively. "Sir, if she's really a special agent, why is she here with us?" Commander Williams looked at Sarah before answering. "Because the people who killed her team are still looking for her. They have contacts throughout the military and intelligence communities. Basic training was supposed to be the perfect place to hide. No one would think to look for a highly trained operative among new recruits. But they found her anyway," Sarah said quietly. Speaking for the first time since her identity had been revealed, Williams nodded grimly. 3 days ago, we intercepted communications indicating that hostile agents have identified this base as a possible location for Agent Chen. They're coming, and they're coming soon." The weight of this revelation settled over the formation like a heavy blanket. These recruits had signed up for basic training, not to be caught in the middle of an intelligence operation with deadly consequences. "Sir," Johnson said, his earlier hostility replaced by concern. "What does this mean for us?" "It means," Williams replied, "that this base is now a target. It means that Agent Chen's cover has been blown not just among you, but potentially among people who want her dead. And it means that all of you are now involved in something much bigger and more dangerous than basic training." Sarah felt the crushing weight of guilt. These young soldiers had done nothing wrong, yet her presence had put them all in danger. The very thing she had been trying to avoid, innocent people getting hurt because of her past, was now happening. "Agent Chen," Williams said, turning back to her, "we need to discuss your options. The original plan is no longer viable." Sarah nodded, understanding that her time hiding among the recruits was over, but she also knew that the danger wasn't over. It was just beginning. The tattoo on her shoulder, hidden beneath her uniform, contained information that could expose an entire network of intelligence assets. If the wrong people got their hands on it, the consequences would be catastrophic. As the formation was dismissed and the recruits filed away in stunned silence, Sarah realized that her real test was just beginning. The combat skills that had given away her identity would now be needed to keep everyone alive. The mockery and suspicion of her fellow recruits seemed trivial now compared to the deadly reality that was approaching Fort Braxton. Soon they would all discover just how dangerous Sarah Chen's past really was. Within hours of Commander Williams' revelation, Fort Braxton was transformed from a peaceful training facility into a high-security fortress. Sarah found herself in the commander's office, facing a room full of people she recognized from her former life in intelligence operations. "The situation is worse than we initially thought," said Agent Thompson, Sarah's former handler from the Defense Intelligence Agency. "The people hunting you have been planning this operation for months. They're not just coming for you, they're coming for what you know." Sarah unconsciously touched her shoulder where the tattoo was hidden. "The Prometheus files," she said quietly. "Exactly," Thompson confirmed. "The complete list of every deep cover operative in Southeast Asia, their missions, their contacts, and their extraction protocols. All encoded in that tattoo on your shoulder." Commander Williams looked confused. "Tattoo? What tattoo?" Sarah hesitated, then slowly began rolling up her left sleeve. As the fabric moved higher, intricate black ink became visible on her shoulder. But this wasn't decorative artwork. It was an incredibly complex pattern of symbols, numbers, and coded text that covered her entire upper arm. "Jesus," Williams breathed. "How much information is encoded in there?" "Names, locations, mission, details, and contact protocols for 47 active agents," Thompson explained. "If enemy forces get access to that information, our entire intelligence network in Asia collapses overnight. Dozens of people die." The room fell silent as the magnitude of the situation sank in. Sarah wasn't just a target. She was carrying information that could destroy years of intelligence work and cost dozens of lives. "Why isn't this information in a secure database somewhere?" Williams asked. "Because databases can be hacked," Sarah replied. "This was supposed to be the ultimate security measure. The information exists in only one place, literally under my skin. Even I can't read most of it without special decoding equipment." Agent Rodriguez, another member of Thompson's team, spread photos across the conference table. "These are the people coming for you. International mercenaries with military training. They've already killed 6 people trying to track you down." Sarah studied the faces in the photographs. She recognized 2 of them from her last mission, the one that had gone so wrong and left her team dead. Seeing them again brought back memories she had been trying to suppress. "How much time do we have?" she asked. 6 hours, maybe less," Thompson replied. "They've been tracking financial records, military databases, anything that might lead them to your location. Your performance during training exercises was noticed by too many people. Word got out." Commander Williams stood and moved to the window overlooking the training grounds. The recruits who had been mocking Sarah just days earlier were now going through emergency drills, preparing for a threat they barely understood. "Those kids out there signed up to serve their country," he said. "They didn't sign up to die protecting classified information they know nothing about." "Which is why we need to evacuate Agent Chen immediately," Thompson said. We have extraction protocols in place. We can have her off this base in 2 hours. No! Sarah's voice was firm and final. If I run now, they'll keep hunting me. More innocent people will get hurt. This has to end here. Sarah, you can't be serious, Thompson protested. These aren't training exercises. These people will kill everyone on this base to get to you. Then we stop them here, Sarah replied. I'm tired of running. I'm tired of good people dying because of something I carry. If they want the information, they can come and try to take it. Commander Williams turned from the window. Agent Chen, I appreciate your courage, but this base isn't designed for this kind of assault. We have training facilities, not defensive positions. Then we'll have to make do with what we have, Sarah said. She moved to the tactical map on the wall. How many personnel do we have available? Counting support staff and instructors, maybe 60 people, Williams replied. But most of them have never seen real combat. Sarah studied the map, her mind shifting into tactical planning mode. The recruits, they've been through basic weapons training, right? Yes, but Sarah, Thompson interrupted. You're talking about using untrained soldiers against professional killers. I'm talking about protecting this base and everyone in it, Sarah shot back. These recruits may not have combat experience, but they're not helpless, and they deserve to know what they're facing. Williams considered this for a moment. What are you proposing? Full disclosure, Sarah said. Tell them everything. Let them know what's coming, and give them the choice to fight or evacuate. But if they stay, we train them for real combat in the next few hours. Agent Rodriguez shook his head. This is insane. We're talking about turning basic training recruits into combat soldiers in a matter of hours. No, Sarah corrected. We're talking about giving them the tools they need to survive. Because whether we like it or not, they're already targets. The people coming here won't distinguish between Agent Sarah Chen and Private Johnson. They'll kill everyone to make sure there are no witnesses. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the harsh reality of the situation. There would be no clean extraction, no easy solution. The battle was coming to Fort Braxton whether they were ready or not. There's something else, Thompson said reluctantly. The tattoo isn't just a security measure. It's also a tracking device. Sarah's blood ran cold. What do you mean? The ink contains trace amounts of radioactive isotopes. They're too small to cause health problems, but they can be detected by specialized equipment. That's how they've been tracking you. You're telling me I've been carrying a homing beacon this entire time? Sarah's voice was filled with anger and betrayal. It was a necessary precaution, Thompson said defensively. We needed to be able to find you if you were captured or went missing. And now the enemy can find me too, Sarah said bitterly. That's how they knew I was here. Commander Williams stepped forward. Can the tattoo be removed? Not without destroying the information, Thompson replied. The encoding is integrated into the tattoo structure. Remove the tattoo, lose the intelligence. Sarah laughed bitterly. So my choice is to keep the information and stay a target forever, or destroy years of intelligence work and let dozens of agents die. There might be another option, Williams said slowly. What if we let them come but we're ready for them? What if we turn this base into a trap instead of a target? Sarah looked at him with new respect. You're talking about using ourselves as bait. I'm talking about ending this threat once and for all, Williams replied. These mercenaries have been terrorizing intelligence assets for months. Maybe it's time someone fought back. As the afternoon wore on, plans began to take shape. The recruits would be told the truth and given the choice to stay or go. Those who remained would receive intensive combat training from Sarah and the other experienced personnel. The base would be fortified as much as possible in the time they had left. It was a desperate plan with little chance of success, but it was better than running and letting innocent people continue to die. As Sarah prepared to address the recruits who had mocked her just days earlier, she knew that everything was about to change forever. The tattoo on her shoulder felt heavier than ever, carrying the weight of dozens of lives and the future of intelligence operations across an entire continent. Soon she would find out if the information hidden in that ink was worth the price everyone was about to pay. As the sun began to set over Fort Braxton, the recruits gathered in the main assembly hall for what they had been told was an emergency briefing. The same young soldiers who had been mocking Sarah just hours earlier now sat in stunned silence as Commander Williams explained the full scope of the threat they were facing. "So, let me get this straight," Private Johnson said, his voice shaky. "The woman we've been harassing is actually a highly trained special agent. She's carrying classified information that could save dozens of lives, and now international assassins are coming here to kill all of us." "That's correct," Williams replied grimly. Private Chen raised his hand. "Sir, what happens if we choose to evacuate?" "You'll be transported to a secure location until this situation is resolved," Sarah answered, stepping forward. "No questions asked, no judgment passed. This isn't your fight and no one expects you to stay." Rodriguez, who had been keeping the notebook of Sarah's suspicious activities, spoke up. "But if we leave, who's going to defend the base?" "Military personnel and whatever volunteers remain," Williams said. "But I want to be clear about something. This isn't a training exercise. The people coming here are professional killers. If you stay, there's a real chance you won't survive." The hall erupted in whispered conversations as the recruits discussed their options. Sarah watched their faces, seeing fear, confusion, and something she hadn't expected: determination. Private Williams stood up. "Agent Chen, you could have told us who you really were from the beginning." "Why didn't you?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Because I was trying to protect you. I thought if I could just blend in, complete my training, and disappear into the regular army, none of you would ever be in danger. I was wrong. You were protecting us by lying to us." Johnson's voice carried an edge of his old hostility. "I was protecting you by keeping you ignorant," Sarah replied honestly. "Sometimes ignorance really is bliss. But that option is gone now." Sergeant Davis stepped forward. "Anyone who chooses to stay needs to understand what they're signing up for. This won't be like the training exercises. There won't be safety protocols or practice ammunition. People are going to get hurt, and some of us probably won't make it through the night." The weight of his words settled over the room. These young soldiers had joined the military knowing that combat was a possibility. But they had expected years of training before facing real danger, not hours. "I need to know who's staying and who's leaving," Williams announced. "The evacuation transport leaves in 30 minutes. After that, we go into full defensive mode." One by one, the recruits began to stand and make their choices. Private Martinez was the first to move toward the evacuation staging area. 3 others followed him. But then something unexpected happened. Johnson stood up and walked toward Sarah instead. "I've been a complete jerk to you," he said, extending his hand. "I'm sorry, and I'm staying." Sarah shook his hand, seeing genuine resolve in his eyes. "Thank you." Chen followed Johnson's lead. "I'm staying too. We started this together, we'll finish it together." Rodriguez closed his notebook and dropped it in a trash can. "I won't need this anymore. Count me in." By the time the 30 minutes were up, only 8 recruits had chosen to evacuate. The remaining 12 stood with the 36 military personnel who would defend Fort Braxton. It wasn't many against professional killers, but it was more than Sarah had dared to hope for. The next few hours were a blur of intense preparation. Sarah worked with Sergeant Davis to turn the recruits into functional combat soldiers in record time. They reviewed weapons handling, defensive positions, and basic tactics. But more importantly, they learned to work as a team. "Remember," Sarah told them as they prepared defensive positions around the base perimeter, "these people are professionals, but they're not superhuman. They bleed, they make mistakes, and they can be stopped. The key is to work together and trust each other." Commander Williams set up a command center in the main building, coordinating with intelligence services who were tracking the approaching threat. Agent Thompson's team had positioned themselves at strategic points around the base, using their experience to bolster the defense. As midnight approached, the attack began. It started with the power going out, plunging the base into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting eerie shadows across the training grounds. Then came the first explosions as the mercenaries breached the outer perimeter. "Contact north fence," came the radio call from one of the watch posts. Sarah was positioned with Johnson and Chen in a defensive position, overlooking the main approach to the command center. Through her night vision scope, she could see figures moving with military precision through the darkness. "How many?" Johnson whispered. "At least 12, Sarah replied. "Maybe more." The battle was intense but brief. The mercenaries had expected to find a soft target, a training base with minimal security. Instead, they encountered coordinated resistance from people who knew the terrain and fought with desperate determination. Sarah's tactical knowledge proved invaluable, but it was the courage of the recruits that made the difference. Johnson, who had spent days mocking her abilities, now followed her orders without question. Chen used his analytical skills to coordinate defensive positions. Rodriguez proved to be an excellent marksman under pressure. The turning point came when one of the mercenaries managed to reach the command center and demanded that Sarah surrender herself in exchange for the lives of the others. Standing in the doorway with Commander Williams at gunpoint, the assassin thought he had won. "It's over, Agent Chen," he called out. "Come out now or everyone dies." Sarah emerged from her position, hands raised. But as she walked toward the command center, she was secretly communicating with her team through hand signals they had practiced during their hasty training session. When she was close enough, Sarah suddenly dropped to the ground as Johnson and Chen opened fire from concealed positions. The mercenary was eliminated before he could harm the commander, and the remaining attackers found themselves surrounded by defenders who had been carefully positioned during the firefight. By dawn, it was over. 7 mercenaries lay dead, and the rest had been captured or driven off. The base had suffered casualties. 2 military personnel, and 1 recruit had been seriously wounded, but the attack had been repelled. As medical personnel tended to the wounded and intelligence agents secured the captured attackers, Sarah sat on the steps of the command center, finally allowing herself to feel the exhaustion and relief. Johnson approached her, his uniform torn and dirty from the night's fighting. "So what happens now?" Sarah looked at the tattoo on her exposed shoulder, the intricate ink that had caused so much trouble. "Now we extract the information properly, get it to the people who need it, and maybe save some lives. And then?" Sarah smiled for the first time in months. "Then maybe I can finally be honest about who I am." Commander Williams joined them, looking older but satisfied. "Agent Chen, I have a proposition for you. We're going to need a new instructor for advanced combat training. Someone with real experience who can teach these recruits what they need to know. Interested?" Sarah looked at the group of young soldiers who had proven themselves in the crucible of real combat. They had started as suspicious strangers who mocked her abilities. They had become trusted allies who would follow her into battle. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'd like that very much." The mockery had turned to respect. The suspicion had become trust, and the secrets that had nearly destroyed them all had finally brought them together. Sarah Chen was no longer hiding who she was. She was ready to embrace it and help others do the same.